everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Do you have everything done around your yard and garden?
Oh, no.
It's been a nice long fall.
In fact, I broke a pair of pruners.
How'd you do that?
Doing the cleanup. I think they were old and the spring was
Sure.
going anyway. So they just kind of, the spring fell out and that was it. There's not much you can do with that.
Well used.
So I ordered a new set and that already came in. So, here we are. We're at the beginning of November, but this weekend looks pretty nice.
It does.
So I'm going to be out there and I'm going to be doing some cleanup this weekend and
I am as well.
Cleaning out the gutters now that most of the leaves have fallen. But yeah, there's still a lot of there's yard work to do. There's not really much gardening now.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like you say, there's yard work.
But there's still a lot of green out there.
Yeah, there is
in the garden.
Because we haven't gotten cold, frigid cold to where every bit of greenery is zapped.
Yep.
The roses. I've noticed roses still have foliage
are
on.
Still
green foliage.
Really, yeah, some of them is really. I was last week. Maybe they've fallen off since, but some of the roses still looked really pretty good.
Exactly. There's a couple of rare blossoms on, maybe not that rare, but some rare blossoms that still look pretty decent.
I know that. Is that typical? Well, I mean, it depends on the typical depends on, there's not a normal,
Sure.
as John Wheeler will like to say, but weather-wise, but we don't always see roses last through October.
Exactly. And into November. Yeah. And I can still get a shovel in the ground. I mean, not that. Well, actually, I do have some tulips I have to plant yet, but I can still get a shovel in the ground because usually the first half of November, at some point, the nighttime temperatures get cold. It doesn't get much above freezing, and the frost settles into where you can't get a shovel in the ground, but we still can.
Did you get your potatoes out yet?
I did.
Okay.
I got the potatoes dug because the ground was too hard, too dry. I just couldn't pry them out. But we got a little bit of rain. It penetrated down. I got the potatoes out.
Excellent.
It was not a record year, but it's okay. Next year will be better. So I got our potatoes.
Well, given that, here we are, we're at the beginning of November, we thought it would be a good time since we've got some cleanup to do in the garden. We've talked about that, but we thought it would be a good time to go over some letters, some emails that you've received.
Oh, it's fun always to hear from everyone.
Yeah. And
we're all in this together. So it's fun to discuss the things, and I love it when people write in.
Yeah, and a lot of these have photos. So remind me, and we'll try to discuss some of these photos.
Let's do it.
So we'll kind of dive in here. This is a woman who says, "I love my larch. Some animal damage from a few years ago just gives it character. Just wanted to share. Have a great week." Brenda Warren. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So what is a larch? We're looking at this.
Yes. Okay. So Brenda sent in a photo, and in the photo, I'll try to paint a mental picture. Okay. On the photo, on either side are two typical evergreen spruce, nice dark green spruce. And in the middle between those is a tree that's the same shape, that classic pyramidal shape. But it's golden, bright golden.
Yeah.
She took the photo nice. There's kind of sun beaming down on it.
Nice blue sky.
And so it looks like that middle evergreen shape is bright golden. Well, that is larch. And larch is a fascinating tree. During the growing season, it looks like an evergreen because it has needle-like foliage. And then, lo and behold, in the fall, it turns a brilliant golden color. And then the foliage all drops. The needle-like foliage all drops. And so, even though it looks like your classic evergreen, you get fall color out of it. And then in the fall of the year, the foliage drops off. So it's absolutely awesome. And the reason why she just wanted to share with us is she loves it. She loves that neat shape of it. And she loves it that you get some fall color. And I like the way that she contrasted in her yard the true evergreens, with the green needles all winter long. She contrasted that with the golden, the golden similar shape, and it's just wonderful. So larch, Larch, well adapted. The full name for that is Siberian larch. Okay. And so Siberian, that tells us it's pretty winter hardy. And it is hardy way up into zone 3, up into Canada. And it is not soil sensitive. It's not picky. It does very well in alkaline soil. Our heavy clay Red River Valley soil does great in Minnesota, South Dakota, all over the region. So large. And so it deserves much wider planting.
Okay.
So a great contrasting plant, a tree. Now, also in the backyard, if a person's looking for something for some screening, evergreen spruce trees do that well, but larch does also. So during because these don't get so terribly wide, I suppose you still want to give it, it's going to get a spread at the base of still probably 12 to 15 feet, and it will get, 30 feet tall, maybe more. So think of the same shape as our evergreen spruce. Okay. But during the growing season, a larch will provide screening. So when you're out in your yard, it will, because it has the foliage all the way to the ground, it will give you privacy and protection. And then, of course, you get fall color, and then the needles all drop. So in the winter, when you're not out in the yard much and don't need that privacy, well, the branches will be bare. But they're a pretty bare. So anyway, that's all about the larch.
And you're certainly right about the contrast when you see this photo, just how it just stands out. I mean, to the point that I think if you were driving by, you would wonder if that, because it looks so much like the other evergreens there, you may wonder if it's not
evergreen with that pretty fall color.
Yeah, or is that healthy? But it is. It's a very full.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's kind of a shocking.
It is, and you do
change.
see larch around. It's not a brand new invention, but it's nice to see them being used more as more people become aware. And I'm seeing it in some commercial landscapes. The Microsoft campus in South Fargo, as I was driving along the west side of that. I see it quite a number of larch and beautiful. And locally owned garden centers do sell larch. And so a beautiful tree. People in Minnesota, I got an additional email wondering, is larch the same as tamarack? And it is. There are several types of adapted larch. Okay, I mentioned Siberian larch. There's another well-adapted one called eastern larch, more native to the eastern part of us. But in Minnesota, you see that eastern larch, and that is another common name for that is tamarack. The name tamarack is used in Minnesota for different things. I think, isn't there a Tamarack National Forest?
Tamarack Wildlife
Refuge. Exactly. So yes, tamarack is in that same larch, another name for a type of larch.
When you said foliage, I have to admit, when you say foliage, I don't think of needles.
No, you think of leaves.
Yeah, leaves. And
exactly.
Foliage is kind of an umbrella term that does include
exactly.
needles.
So the needles on an evergreen, it's foliage. So I kind of used the term, I believe, needle-like foliage. Yeah, so fascinating. So I believe it's and it does get little cones on, kind of like an evergreen. The botanists call it a cone-bearing deciduous plant. Deciduous means that the foliage drops in the fall of the year for winter. Yeah, fascinating. So we need to be using. That's on my bucket list. I don't have a larch.
Okay.
I need to plant a larch.
That's on my bucket list. You've got the space for it, and it would be. It is like you say. It's just kind of it'd be a great perimeter tree,
sure
a border
would.
tree.
I can see that in the back corner of a yard where, it fit well in the back corner where you maybe like a little screening and protection.
The one thing I would say is if I were to plant a larch, I would want to be sure I had a good view of it in the fall.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to put it behind other things where I wouldn't be able to see it. I would want to see those colors, and I'd want it to stand in front of something to really, like you say, just stand out and pop against an evergreen or against something else.
Yeah. Fun. I'm happy she sent that in.
Well, here's another letter. Hi, Don. Pat and I just seeded a new lawn this fall in October. It is growing good, but we were wondering if we should remove the cover before the snowfall to prevent snow mold in spring. This is from Jan Knodel. And she got a couple pictures here that she sent along. And it's the cover is kind of one of those, it's rolled up. It's one of those, it's a light mesh, it's fabric.
Kind of a blanket, a seeding type blanket. And so, they seeded, and of course, I'm seeing the photos of the grass sprouted and it is growing. Now, a couple of things that come to mind. Okay, they indicated that they seeded in October, and the preferred seeding time is typically September 15th in order to get the grass seed to sprout and grow and to establish well enough before winter sets in. So when they seeded in October, they were pushing a little bit, but sometimes we take a few risks and gambles in gardening, and we've had a nice long prolonged fall, so the grass seed sprouted, and so it's doing well. Now, one of the key things to getting grass, no matter when you seed it, one of the key things in getting it to sprout well is continued moisture on the surface. I always call it dark moist because that grass seed is so shallowly planted that it needs just to have plenty of moisture at the surface. And so anytime we can mulch it, that helps so you don't have to water quite as often. And the water that you do apply will stay there for longer. And so typically a person would add some mulch. I've done seeding where I've done straw, but of course then that blows away. And so you can buy these blankets, and maybe you've seen them along highways. Sometimes when they're seeding highway ditches,
especially when there's an incline.
Yeah, an incline.
Where there may be some erosion.
Yeah, where it would all kind of wash away. And so you oftentimes see these blankets, and it's almost kind of like a straw-like material. And they have kind of a mesh, kind of a plasticky mesh on to kind of hold it in place. And so those erosion-type blankets do give good protection. And so the photo that they sent show the area where the blanket has been rolled out and the grass is growing through it.
And it looks like it's growing right along a sidewalk or something.
Yeah, it looks like they maybe put in a new sidewalk, and I'm sure then the disturbed soil beside that, they wanted to get grass growing again. So my first question that I asked of them is, what type of blanket? Because they were wondering, okay, now that the grass is growing, should we take off that blanket? And so my first question to them was, do they know what type of blanket it was? Because sometimes when you put a protective blanket over a seed bed, some of them are supposed to be taken off. For example, burlap. Used to be used quite a bit. Sometimes it still is. But at a certain point, you needed to take off that burlap, and you needed to get it off before it ripped up the seedlings with it. Once they started growing through the burlap, well, then it gets a little iffy. So I asked if they knew what type of blanket it was, because some you just leave in place, and they'll biodegrade. You just leave it in place, let the grass grow through it, and everything is great. And so they replied back and said, yes, the directions did say that the mulch blanket should be left in place and everything will just disintegrate. Because I said, if you do take it off, maybe test a little corner to make sure that it's not going to rip everything up along with the blanket. And so then once they indicated and looked at the directions, yes, that blanket is meant to be left in place. It'll continue to keep that seed bed nice and moist, and we won't be disturbing the grass seedlings by removing it. So they were a little concerned at first that maybe it would make snow mold or something over winter. But no, I think it's going to be just great. And so that'll give a little extra insulation even to keep that grass growing longer into the fall.
Yeah, and especially because we, here we are, we're in the first full week of November. We haven't got any snow, so we don't have any other kind of ground cover. So if we have wind, that could erode, that could blow away
that could
a
be
lot
kind
of
tough on those little seedlings.
Yeah, and it could blow
exactly.
Well, it could also blow away some of the dirt too that you've got there.
Exactly.
You could always put in more dirt, but still, you just kind of want to. It does.
So that'll be a good buffer on that.
I got kind of a follow up with this. So where I live in Moorhead, they just ripped up our street, and then they finished it, and they had to go into the boulevard, so they put hydro seed down over the boulevard, and one we have on our side of the sidewalk, on the owner's side of the sidewalk, not the boulevard. We planted a little kind of garden that butted up against the sidewalk, so some of the hydro seed did fill in along there, didn't hit any of our plants or anything. Can I just dig that up if that's hydro seed? Because it's kind of hard.
Right. Yep. Because when
Sets
that
up a little
hydro seed
hard.
goes on, it gets applied in kind of a wet slurry.
Yeah.
And then when it dries, then it forms kind of a little crust to kind of keep everything in place carefully. And sometimes that has the seed in it. Sometimes the seed is put down first, and then the hydro seed slurry is put on top of that. Sometimes the seed is mixed right into that slurry. So if there's kind of some overspray of that slurry into an area you don't want it, typically there could be grass growing then where you don't want it. So the quicker you can get that off of that area. So if it's an area where you've got some perennial flowers or something, yeah, I would get that slurry of hydro seed off of there. Otherwise, in the spring, you probably will find some grass growing where you'd rather not have grass growing.
We didn't plan it, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be really nice because we have, they did that over an area. When it's on the boulevard, we'd had 2 trees that had been taken out over the last decade. So, the area was kind of a little rolling, you would find out as you were walking through there. So I think it'll really be pretty nice, but we don't have any plans to plant out there on the boulevard.
Great.
Well, here we've got another one. Hi, Don. Share another colorful bonus for us that Janet wants to share with you. Okay. So anyways, hi, Don. This is a picture of 2 fall mums, bought at a box store last fall. Instead of composing them, I think I meant composting them. I planted them in the garden to see what would happen. Realizing we had a mild winter here is a current picture of them. Gorgeous flowers.
Yeah, so Janet and Larry Carlson sent in the photo of their mom. And so again, in the fall of the year, almost every store and grocery store, big box stores all sell these big decorative potted mums, and they're beautiful. And so a common question is, can I plant those? After maybe the flowers fade, can I plant those out in the perennial garden? Will they come back? Is it worth it? Well, anyway, so a year ago, Janet and Larry decided they don't have anything to lose, so let's plant it. And so now, a year later, sent us a beautiful photo. And it must have been a combination, Mom, because within that big, beautiful clump of mums blooming in their perennial garden, there's a yellow part, a dark pink, and kind of a reddish rose. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And so it worked very well for them. And like they said, it was a mild winter last winter, but we didn't have insulating snow either. And so it didn't get much insulation. So when I'm asked about whether we can plant out those decorative mums that you got, I usually say, well, yeah, go ahead. We really don't have anything to lose.
Yeah, you've already bought it.
If it doesn't come up in the spring, you
pull it out and put in something else.
Exactly. And it may reward you just like it did Larry and Janet. And so a beautiful, beautiful mum. Now, okay, that brings up the point too. What if you actually would like perennial mums in your garden? And there are some types that are more winter hardy. You see, the types we buy in those big pots at the big box stores, they may not be the most winter hardy, as they might not survive. But there are some types of mums. And of course, mums are such a beautiful fall blooming perennial. They bloom after we've had frost. Sometimes the snow will fall and they'll still be blooming through the snow. Garden centers in the spring sell some that have increased winter hardy. So if you do want perennial mums in your flower garden, it's best to plant them in the spring from starter plants. And then they have the whole growing season to establish, and they'll bloom in the fall and then overwinter and survive. But the key there is winter hardy types. University of Minnesota did a lot of work on winter hardy mums. They developed the Min series, MINN.
Right.
Yeah, Min Gopher, Min Yellow, Min White, Min Autumn. You name it, there's a Min. And so check the locally owned garden centers for those. We're at that time of year in the spring, we're not thinking fall flowers. Yeah. But that's the time to buy those. Another good series developed at University of Minnesota is the one called Mammoth, the Mammoth mums. Mammoth Yellow, Mammoth Pink, Mammoth Rose, etc. And so look for those, plant them out, and then, man, they're going to reward you that fall in blooming. So check the locally owned garden centers. You're probably not going to find them at the big box stores at their garden centers, but locally owned will usually have those. And those are the best ones to try. They're never a sure thing. I've planted some of those types that in a severe winter they can die out. But it's best if you leave the tops on, the above ground portion.
I was going to ask,
on.
You don't want to deadhead them.
Yeah, don't want to deadhead them. Leave those tops on over winter. That'll help catch snow and also give them a little leaf protection, some extra, rake some leaves up over them. And with a little luck, they'll reward you. Especially that Mammoth series has been really, really quite vigorous and has done quite well for gardeners in our area. So interesting discussion of those.
When you were talking about raking up some leaves, that idea of getting some, we talked about mulch earlier on something else. We've talked about in the past about that you can use pine needles as mulch. Do you think you could use a larch? When a larch drops, you would have some very colorful mulch.
We're talking double duty here.
Yeah, full service.
So because you can buy bags of pine needles, and in other areas where pines are maybe more common, they love to rake that up and use those as a mulch, a surface mulch on their perennials. So yes, the larch has probably about a 1-inch needle-like foliage, but yeah, absolutely, they could be raked up and added as a surface mulch in the perennial garden.
All right, this is fun. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, let's look at some more letters.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back, and we're going over some letters, Don, that you've received recently.
I love the mailbag.
It is fun because it's fun to hear about both people's questions, if they have questions about what succeeded or what didn't succeed and why. You always say that we're all in this together and we're all learning. So this is kind of a great opportunity to read these letters, but then also we'll try to post some of these pictures on our Instagram account.
Yes. From time to time we'll do this. So keep on sending the letters and photos and questions and everything else, and from time to time we'll gather some together for a podcast.
Okay, this one is from Deb Meester, and she writes, Mr. Kinsler, our beautiful autumn blaze maple is infested with gall mites, and in researching it online, I get conflicting information. I'm just wondering, do we treat it as information that I researched says there's no point in treating it? It does very little good, if any. It's been suggested that we use Bio-Advanced Tree and Shrub Protect and feed this fall. Do you agree? Again, when I search online, it suggests we should be treated in the spring, so I'm very confused. Can you please help? Deb Meester.
Oh, there's lots of good stuff there to work with. Okay, so Deb sent a photo of her maple tree, and it has growths on the leaves, bumps on the leaves. Now, earlier in the season, and it's called maple leaf gall. And so earlier in the season, those little bumps, projections on the leaves, start out green, then oftentimes they're red. And then as the season progresses, they turn black. So in the photo that she sent, those bumps on the leaves have turned black. And I get a lot of questions and photos on this because especially when a maple tree is young and we can kind of see the leaves in the canopy kind of at eye level, it seems quite, because these look ugly. They look like cancer on a leaf almost. And so it's kind of alarming. Is this a disease that's going to make is it going to kill the tree? So what causes these galls is it's little tiny mites, barely able to be seen unless you had a magnifying glass. And what they do is in early spring, as the leaves are developing, these mites crawl out onto the leaf, and they exude a compound that creates a hard bubble of plant tissue around them. And so those mites are protected inside. So by the time we see those bumps on the maple leaves, and there are other tree leaves also that get this, hackberry, elm, different ones, oak can get this, very common on maple though. And so by the time we see the bumps, those mites have protected themselves inside. And so no spray or anything that we do after the fact is going to penetrate and kill those mites. So on the upside, a lot of research has been done on these, and it has shown that the bumps really cause no harm to the tree.
Okay.
The tree lives with them fine. A big old maple probably has lots of them up in there, but we just don't see them because the leaves are way up high. And so it's just shown that unless all the leaves are almost totally covered with bumps, so that's it's interfering with photosynthesis, then there could be a problem. But usually it's just a few here and there on leaves, and it is visible, but it causes no problem. It's kind of more just cosmetic. It just kind of looks bad. Yeah, exactly. And so there's really no need to treat. If it was a young tree and you absolutely wanted to protect it, there are two things that can be done. There's a product called horticultural oil that garden centers sell. It's a plant-friendly oil. And in the early spring, about the time the leaves are thinking about popping out, you apply this horticultural oil to the trunk of the trees. Then as these mites are trying to crawl towards the leaves, then the oil kills them. And it's a plant-friendly oil. And so that's one way. The other way is to get a systemic insecticide into the tree itself. And that's where, when she mentioned the bioadvanced tree and shrub insecticide, that's the systemic. And systemic means the roots take it up, the product travels internally inside the tree, and it protects it from the inside out. So when and the bioadvanced that's the brand name of the one that you see on the shelves of garden centers, national chains, etc. And so if that is applied at the right time and gotten into the tree, then as those little mites are working on the leaf and starting to penetrate the leaf to create their little bubble, then that will kill them. But the timing is so difficult. See, by the time the tree roots take that up, those mites probably have already started their work. So it's probably, in most cases, it's probably applied too late, because by the time the tree wakes up and soaks that stuff up, they're already active. So now she mentioned doing that in the fall. And so that's probably a better route, is to apply that material in the fall. But you would need to do that probably almost every year. And do you want to do that for something that's just cosmetic or aesthetic? Do you really want to do it? It's not hurting the tree. So that's kind of a personal preference. Maybe on a younger tree, maybe you would. But at a certain point, I don't think a big old maple, you probably aren't going to want or need to do that every year. But common question, maple leaf gall. So we worry about it more than the tree worries about it.
Here's another one. Hi, Don. Gary found one blooming iris and 6 buds in our country garden on October 26th. Amazing. I brought this buds inside into a vase with just water. 4 buds blossomed in the vase on November 4th. So just earlier this week. Sharing this lovely surprise. Our sugar maples were hosting glorious golden leaves, having released some to form a golden carpet below. On October 25th, I caught the setting sun by bending below the trees, aiming the camera through the leaves. Enjoy and feel free to share. Susan Clamby. So Susan included a picture
Sharon
of
and
her
Gary.
iris.
Wow, look at the photo of those iris.
Yeah.
Wow, and it's not just one kind of iris flower. It's a big, how they bloom along the stem.
Yep.
Wow, look at all the flowers on those. And it's a beautiful kind of vibrant purplish, bluish purple, and there's some white kind of in that flower. Absolutely beautiful.
It really looks like with sometimes like glass, like when you see some of these great vintage pieces of glass where it's not stained glass, but like they painted on glass or something.
Yeah, kind of a carnival glass.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. That almost looks like, like carnival glass. And the neat thing is that photo could be June at the highlight of iris blooming season. And here it is November.
Why do you think that something happened?
Well, a couple of things that come to mind. There are actually some iris varieties that are called rebloomers.
Oh.
And that they will, but all the conditions have to be just right, and they will bloom in the fall of the year. Not every year. There's a white one called Immortality. That's a good name for it.
Right.
A white one, Immortality. And that's one of the ones that will oftentimes rebloom again in the fall. It blooms in June, blooms again in the fall. But everything's got to just work out perfectly. I've got Immortality. It does not always reliably bloom. And I don't know what variety this was that they had, but I'm guessing. So when you look through an iris specialty catalog, they will indicate if they are rebloomers. And so I'm guessing this is probably one of them. Now, when I say conditions have to be just right, there's got to be something that triggers that into blooming. Maybe it's the right temperature, that starts to form in the fall. Maybe it's moisture, maybe it's fertility. If you're lucky, Sharon and Gary obviously hit the right combination. Their iris did, and so it's treating them. So if you're in the market for iris, planting iris next spring, iris can be planted. Potted iris can be planted in the spring. Garden centers have them actively growing in pots in spring. Okay. The other time to plant iris is like in August. You find the kind of the dormant corm rhizomes of those. And so when you're shopping for iris at local owned garden centers, some nice potted ones next spring, look for those that indicate the rebloomers. You may as well, if it has a chance of reblooming like this did for them, beautiful.
Yeah, and whatever they did, keep at it.
Yeah, and then
the leaves here from the maple,
of sugar maple. Now they don't indicate maybe where this was from. This could be at a lake home in Minnesota. Sugar maple is best adapted probably east of the Red River Valley, but there are nice sugar maples in the Fargo-Moorhead area also. They're a little soil sensitive. They like the natural forested soils of Minnesota and on east. But it's interesting to try. If somebody would like to try a sugar maple, I always mention, maybe don't plant it somewhere where you absolutely want a tree, for 100 years. But, if you've got another spot, so if the sugar maple grows, you're going to really have something. And if it doesn't grow, well, then plant something else.
Yeah.
So there are some beautiful, when you drive around the Red River Valley, there are some beautiful sugar maples also.
There's a couple in Fargo that are just nice Sam and I make a point of driving around and checking out and making sure that because when you get something like that that's so colorful and if the sun is right, it's so nice to see.
Another common question is, how is my maple really a sugar maple? Well, each of the maples have kind of slightly different shaped leaves. If you think of the maple leaf on the Canadian flag, that classic, that's a sugar maple leaf. Yeah. They've got that classic maple leaf to them. So, some other types are a little finer cut, et cetera. But anyway, gosh, thanks to them for sending that beautiful photo.
Well, here's another letter from Larry Carlson. This looks like kind of a follow-up one. He said, Don, I wanted to share the facts with you that your guidance on using spinosad on the apple trees was very successful for myself and John Kern. The apples were without the brown streaks going through the white flesh of the apple to the center core. So far, from the 400 plus apples that I have peeled, cored, and sliced and examined, if there was any insect activity on the outer skin of the apple, it only made it to the inner skin side. The spinosad worked this year. John Kern also shared the facts that apple trees I sprayed for him with spinosad were very successful. That's from Larry Carlson.
Yeah, and of course, two thoughts there. And one is, of course, the number one apple insect problem in the upper Midwest is the apple maggot. And what that does is the apple maggot, usually around the end of June or so, the apple maggot adult, which is kind of a little fly, lays eggs on the fruit, the developing fruit. Those eggs hatch into the larvae, the maggot, that spends the summer inside our apples, just kind of tunneling through, making little brown streaks. And then when you go to harvest the apples, everything probably looks okay, but then you go to cut it, and the internal is kind of brown and streaks and just not the nice white white flesh of an apple. And so, well, at that point, it's too late for that time. So many people like Larry want to be proactive. And so starting around the 20th or so of June, it depends on the weather when these flies and things become active. But around the 20th to June, or maybe if it's a later season, around July 4th or so even, to start spraying the apple trees. And at that point, they aren't blooming anymore, so the sprays that we apply aren't going to kill our honeybees and the pollinators that we need. And so the product that Larry mentioned is an organic product called Spinosad. Spinosad, Spinosad. It's a great insecticide. It's one of the few that will actually control Colorado potato beetles, but it also will control apple maggot. And so it's a good, friendly organic type product. So he was wondering if that would work. Yes, and it was listed for apple maggot control. And he also wondered about how often would you have to apply that? Well, to control apple maggot, different products will cling to the apples for longer periods of time. And because the apple maggot adult continues to lay eggs almost into August, you need to repeat applications. So when I had looked up on the label to see how long will that product protect, it said 10 to 14 days. So I suggested to Larry that really every 10 to 14 days, give it a spray. And when you spray an apple tree, you need to apply enough so that the leaves and developing fruit are wet. You don't have to go beyond that. It doesn't have to be running off the tree, but get it so that they're nice and wet. And so Larry did that. He followed the label directions carefully, and it protected his apples.
Do you spray that? Is it one of those things that comes along with an applicator that you kind of screw into your hose and sprays out like that, like some lawn feeder or herbicides?
Yeah, you can use this. Now, this Spinosad isn't a ready-to-use product. It comes as a concentrate. Concentrate. And so, but the hose end sprayers that you mentioned would be a good way to apply it, because some of those, there are those developed especially for spraying trees that have a little more force and can reach a distance. And so those can certainly be used. And I believe Larry in another email indicates he just uses his 2-gallon pump sprayer, mixes the concentrate up in that. The label will tell you how much to use in a gallon of water, and then he sprays it that way.
I was just wondering because, apple trees can be kind of tall. So how would you get that coverage just with a pump sprayer, do you think? A lot of ladder work?
Well, now that is why we prune our apple trees.
Right.
And so, we're going to talk all about that in probably February, March. And that's why apple trees, both for picking and spraying, that's a good case for keeping them pruned so that they're at a manageable height. But you are absolutely right, because how do you spray if you don't do pruning and maintain that height? Lower height, how are you going to spray and protect those apples? So it's fun it's fun when you go and harvest your apples to know that your work paid off.
Yeah.
Because it is. You have to be purposeful in spraying. And so, that's just fun. There are other products that will protect apples besides Spinosad. I like to apply home orchard spray. The garden centers have a fruit tree spray, sometimes it's called, and that has both a fungicide and an insecticide in it. So you're protecting from both diseases and insects. So there are a number of products, but Spinosad is a great one to have on the shelf.
All right. One last letter here. Don, maybe you can settle a little agreement. We took down a dying pine tree. There was a large growth, which a neighbor called a witch's broom, in it. We cleaned up most of the tree, but my husband left the section with the growth in our yard. He's sure, quote unquote, someone would want it. Are there people out there that are interested in or study these, or can we dispose of it? Thank you, Lori Houle.
And of course, it's always fun to settle some disagreements because usually there's a bit of truth in no matter how we look at it. And they sent a wonderful photo. Now, a witch's broom is a term kind of in botany, forestry, etc. A witch's broom is for kind of an unnatural proliferation of growth. a big mass of twigs. For example, on a shrub, a witch's broom would be a big mass of closely spaced twigs. When the rest of it is just normally branched, then you see this big cluster of closely spaced things. So the photo that they sent was the trunk of an evergreen tree, and there's this big cluster of masses of twiggy growth on it. And so that's what's called a witch's broom. Sometimes a witch's broom will be up in like an ash tray. Mites and different things can cause this proliferation, this big cluster up there. So sometimes you see a witch's broom. It's kind of descriptive, of the classic end of a witch's broom kind of looks like that. So it's quite descriptive. And so I can see why it was named that. So now different things cause that. It can be kind of a mutation. It can be insects like mites that kind of feed on the tissue, and then the tissue overreacts by creating this proliferation. And in evergreens, when you get this kind of cluster of odd growth, maybe it's a branch that kind of mutated, plant breeders have actually developed some dwarf evergreens from those witch's brooms. They've taken the cells in the tissue or maybe a cutting or a graft and propagated it from that. And sometimes that you wouldn't really call it a weird growth if it's a nice weird growth.
Right.
For example, if this branch on a big tall spruce, if this branch is just really kind of a nice tight little shape. So they've made some dwarf evergreens by propagating a witch's broom or a mutation, propagating it, and sure enough, it remains just a neat little dwarf version of an evergreen. In some small yards, dwarf evergreens are nice.
Yeah.
And so her husband indicates that he thinks maybe people like to study these. So there's truth there.
Okay.
There's truth there that people do like to study those. But on the other side of that is that there are usually way too many witches' brooms to study than there are people to study them.
Right.
And so in our area, the NDSU Woody Plants Improvement Program, for example, is busy developing winter hardy material. And they would not necessarily have the time or the resources to study a witch's broom type thing. So everyone is right here that it's true. People do study those, but also maybe locally there's not somebody that would have the resources.
The demand
to
may
do
not
it.
be there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, Don, this has been a lot of fun. It's interesting. It's interesting to hear the things that people are dealing with, that people are having, again, successes with, the questions they have about their yard. It really is. And this is a great kind of reflection, too, of what you do in the forum on Saturdays that's published. You take questions from people and you publish the pictures.
We call
and you
it
publish
fielding questions.
Fielding questions. So, but it's fun to talk about this on the air, too.
It is. And it's fascinating. Occasionally there'll be a similar situation, such as maple leaf gall, but no two situations are ever alike. And so I love opening my email inbox because there's always something fresh and new.
Well, if people have questions for you of any kind, or if they want to send you pictures of their successes or their failures or their struggles, or what's working for them, what's the best way to reach you?
Best way is to email me, donald.kinsler, KINZLER @ndsu.edu. Yeah, and keep on sharing. That's wonderful. Either questions or, the one, when you're excited about something, it's fun to spread it around because your success will be other people's success as well.
All right. Well, thanks again, Don.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.